Now, to update the data, we're going to add another button with two classes, btn and btn-outline-secondary. Again, in a real-world application, we need a form for updating a user, but that's a distraction from what we are focusing on right now. So let's stick to a simple button for updating a user. So here's what we get. Now, the alignment of these buttons is a bit messed up. The reason for this is because in this Flex container, we're using justify content between. So the available space is distributed between our Flex items. In this container, we have 3 Flex items or 3 children. We have the username as well as the update and delete buttons. Now, because the name of each user is different, the available space in each row is also different. And that's why we end up with this bad alignment. Now, to solve this issue, we should wrap our update and delete buttons inside a container. With that, we'll have only 2 items in our Flex containers. So when the space is distributed, the username is pushed to the left and our buttons container is pushed to the right. So let's add a simple div here as the container and then move these buttons right here. Save the changes. Now take a look. All right, here's what we get. That's better. The only issue here is that our buttons are so close. We can solve that by adding a horizontal margin. So here's our update button. I'm going to give it another class that is mx-1. So margin horizontal 1. Now that's better. So now let's implement the update functionality. So back to the code. Here we set onClick to a function. In this function, we call update user and pass the current user object. Okay. Now let's create this function. So just before our return statement, we create a function that takes a user object and returns void. Now let's create an object called updated user. We're going to spread the user object to copy all its properties. And then for this demo, we're going to set the name to user.name plus an exclamation mark at the end. Okay. Now here we call set users. Now because we're updating an object, here we should call users.map. We pass an arrow function. Now if the ID of the current user equals the ID of the user that is passed to this function, then we return the updated user. Otherwise, we return the same user object. Now here we have a compilation error because I have a typo. This has to be updated user, not update user function. Okay. Let's see if our implementation is working. So back to the browser, update. Here's an exclamation mark. Try again. Beautiful. Now we need to call the server to save the changes. So we call Axios. Now here we have 2 options. We can use the put or the patch method. What is the difference? Well, in HTTP, we use the put method for replacing an object and the patch method for patching or updating one or more of its properties. The method we choose really depends on how the backend is built. Some backends don't support the patch method. They only support the put method. Now, in this case, because I'm only updating a single property, I'm going to use the patch method. So we call the patch method. Now we need to pass a URL. So we go to JSON placeholder. We grab the URL, paste it here, and then stick the ID at the end. So plus user.id. Now, just like how we created a user, here we need to pass the updated user in the body of the request. So we pass it as the second argument to the patch method, updated user. Now, if the call to the server is successful, there is nothing extra we want to do. But otherwise, if there is an error, we should cache that error. Now, just like before, here we call set error and pass error.message. And also we should restore the list back to the original state. So we declare original users. And then down here, we call set users to original users. Let's see if everything is working. So let's update Lian. Good. Now in the network tab, we have a patch request sent to this endpoint. Let me pull this out so we inspect the request. All right. So here in the headers, you can see we have a request to this endpoint. The request method is patch. In the request payload, we have our user object that is updated with this updated name. And In the response, we have the object that is returned from the server. So the happy path is working. Now to simulate an error, again, I'm going to put an X here. Now, update. So we get an error message and our list is restored back to the original state.